There is a lot of disparity in the way the various countries in Africa go around taxing the digital economy. And I believe that's basically as a result of the fact that value-added tax or its equivalent still remains a domestic tax, unlike, say, a customs duties, which can be administered across border amongst various countries in a region. Yeah, so you'd find, depending on the level of penetration of things like the internet and mobile telephony in a country, then the pace of the digital transformation differs across various countries on the continent. So what you'll find is that countries that are more advanced with the penetration of internet and mobility then have been more eager to then get that part of the economy then taxed. So that's part of the finding that we came up with.
Now, you also pointed out that the current rules and measures in place may not align with what you called accepted international best practices. As a result, we have a lot of controversy and uncertainty in the sector right now. Give us more insight into what you meant by that.
What has happened is that because this is a new economy for most countries globally, Africa is not an exception. So we found that sometimes we've moved away from the basic canons of a good taxation system. So aspects like the simplicity, am I required to register and account for taxes? On which services am I required to account for the VAT? Some of those aspects remain very controversial in the sense that it's very difficult to define and describe everything that would be provided as a service through the digital ecosystem. And similar to, I guess, the taxpayers themselves, then the policymakers and the revenue authorities then have grappled to then come up with policies that address these aspects, whilst also balancing that with the desire to collect revenue from this economy.
Now, I'm curious about what you mean by international best practices exactly, because this issue of how to tax the digital economy, it's not just an African issue. In the EU, in the US, there's a lot of debate about what taxing that segment of the economy would look like. So give us a sense of what you mean by international best practices.
It's, I guess, aligned to what I was just mentioning earlier. So I do acknowledge that the more developed economies like in Europe as well as the Americas are also grappling with the same challenges we find ourselves grappling with in Africa. I guess what they've done, and they have the benefit in certain parts of the world that they belong to a common market block. So in essence, you can come up with rules and such that the rules are applied harmoniously across various countries. Some of the countries have then adopted a framework which allows for registration in one country, and then found many mechanisms of actually sharing the revenue that comes out of say collection from this kind of an economy. In Africa, we're still very territorial, and what then happens is that each and every country is keen and desirous of taxing this economy, and have come up with their own rules. So aspects like I was touching on around the simplicity, around whether I need to register or not register, whether there is a threshold within which I then come into the taxing net, whether I collect that tax from the supplier of the services or the recipient of the services, then becomes a bit blurry. And in certain parts of the world, we'll see a desire to then limit the registration requirement for a non-resident supplier, for instance, to only suppliers that are making those services available to individuals like you and myself. But if I then supply to a business in what is referred to as a business-to-business transaction, then the recipient of the service then gets to account and declare the taxes to the government, as opposed to getting a non-resident then having an additional registration obligation in a country where they do not have a presence.
Well, it's all very complex, but I'd like to get a sense of the progress made so far, because according to your report, about 21 of 54 countries in Africa are enacting rules that target this electronic supplied services. 5 more countries, you say, have some of those in the pipeline. So give us some insight into the commitment right now that you've seen to update those tax rules.
It's not all gloom. I think we're on the right journey. So the African governments, through organizations like the Africa Tax Administration Forum, working together with organizations like the OECD and the World Bank, then coming up or have come up with a VAT digital toolkit, which is meant to help various governments. Even as you're saying, we have domestic and individualized country-specific legislation.